Okay, there we go. Just like that, we have Tony on the program with us. Tony, thank you for joining us for Deer Talk Now. We really appreciate you joining us this morning.
Always have time to talk about deer.
Awesome. I was telling the listeners and the viewers, if for those who aren't aware, Deer Talk Now podcast, if you're listening to this on iTunes or wherever you're downloading it, you can also watch the video versions, and we'll give you those at the end of the program. But Tony, your show, The American Way, you've been on Pursuit for, is it 12 years already?
Actually, we just finished season 13, starting season 14.
My goodness, that is awesome. Congratulations.
Yeah, we're dinosaurs in TV years, I think.
Well, but a testament is you've been in the same network the entire time.
Yeah, we can remember literally to the very beginning of Pursuit Channel, the very first season. And there were a lot of naysayers, and they'll never make it, and they'll take your money and they'll run away. But um, I shook Rusty's hand, and he told me that the folks that brought him to the dance would always be taken care of. And Rusty's word is as good as gold, and it's always been that way, and it's home to us, and no regrets looking back.
That is awesome. Rusty Falk started Pursuit Channel in 2008. And the reason that I'm impressed, working in television, we've had our show since 2005, but we've been on NBC, we've been on Versus, we've been on Sportsman Channel, and we finally found a home with Pursuit. And we couldn't be happier with the Saturday Night Deer Camp block that we have. It's just been a great relationship, because what I've always said with Pursuit Channel is not only the guys and gals who run the network, but the content creators like yourself are real people. They're real hunters. It's none of this made in Hollywood kind of stuff. It's real hunters and giving real practical advice, which I think resonates, and that's why the network has been so successful.
Well, I think I agree. I think the difference was with Pursuit that I've always seen was that Rusty Falk, the guy that runs Pursuit, was an independent producer before he had the network. So, from my perspective, he understands what it's like for the guys and gals who put a show together. He knows their struggles. He knows everything that we deal with on a daily basis because he was there. He walked in our shoes. So, from my point of view, it's always easier to work with somebody that knows what it's like to do what we do. And you don't always get that sometimes.
No, you don't. And also, he understands what the viewers want, which is at the end of the day, which is the most important thing. And he's assembled not only a good team there, but the list of programming is impressive.
I agree.
And the cream always rises to the top. So let's talk about your show, The American Way. For those who haven't seen it, give us maybe just a 30-second elevator pitch on how you came up with the idea and where you came from and where the show is now.
Well, the idea came to me. I'm a heavy equipment operator by trade, and the idea hit me one day in an excavator that there was 400 outdoor television shows out there, and I needed to come up with something that wasn't one of those 400 shows. I'm a working man, a blue collar guy by trade, and I know what it feels like to work 12, 14 hours, bust your tail, and never hear thank you. So I decided that I would come up with this thing called a blue collar spotlight, say thanks to folks that make America go every single day, and then wrap an outdoor television show around it. David Blanton told me right from the beginning, Angie and I, if we didn't build a show that was unique, that we would probably struggle. And that was the best advice we were ever given. And 14 seasons later, here's The American Way. We're consistently in the top 5 on the network. And we truly believe it's because of that blue collar spotlight.
So you started, okay, this is season 14. How have things progressed from where you started to where you are today? Are you doing things any differently, or have you found things might have worked better than they did in the beginning?
Well, obviously, the longer you do something, the better you get at it. the one thing I will say is has changed. I mean, obviously, production quality of the show has gotten better simply because the more you do this, the better you get at it. And if you don't get better at it, you're not going to be around very long. Um, I've seen change the most is the outdoor industry itself. Um, I've seen it go from the beginning where you dealt with individual companies and owners, mom and pops that owned the companies you deal with them, to see it now where, individual groups own 75 companies. You don't know from one year to the next if you're working with somebody, if you're going to work with them again, because they may get bought up by some Wall Street conglomerate. And it's made it tough, to be real frank with you. It's made it really tough because you know as well as I do, you've been around a long time. The outdoor industry and the success of a show is based on partnerships and relationships. And when you don't know from one year to the next if that relationship is even going to be there, it makes it pretty rough because you may pour several years into a relationship and then have it ripped away from you overnight. So I think nowadays, being in the outdoor industry, running an independent outdoor television show, it's not for the meek and mild. You've got to be persistent and you got to be tough, and you have to learn how to bounce back. Because if you don't, you're not going to be around very long.
That's some good points you make there. Ironically, I'll bring it back to the whole premise of your show, the blue collar aspect. I grew up. My dad was an independent carpenter contractor growing up, and he dealt with individuals. When he would buy his materials, he would go to the lumber yard. It was a locally owned, and that's all changed. I mean, he could get all of his materials he was buying from an individual. Well, flash forward to he's long retired, but flash forward today, they always say go big or go home. I feel bad for the guys who are trying to do it. My dad raised 7 kids as an independent carpenter, and I don't know how in the world you could do that today. I don't think you can. Not only just, in that aspect, in the hunting industry, in any industry that we work in, we're feeling that pinch. We're feeling that the world is becoming more, like you said, a conglomerate, which kind of scares me. But we're not going to talk about that. We want to talk about hunting. And the thing that I really appreciate about your show, well, first of all, I know it's you and your wife, but you also have some pro staff members or team members. Tell me about some of your team members.
Well, our guys are just like us. They're just working guys, and so they have to put food on the table and still figure out a way to go out and manage their properties and kill big whitetails. And I've always said I think that's one of the secrets to our success is not just Angie and I, but the folks that hunt with the show. Just real people, real guys. Just like the majority of the people that tune in every week, guys that are working 50, 60 hours, 70 hours a week, taking one day a week off to try to get their properties ready, trying to scratch a food plot in, trying to find a way to kill a bigger buck and keep their bills paid and find time for their family at the same time. So at the end of the day, I think when people watch the show and they see these guys that are doing this, they relate to that because that's who they are as well.
Yeah. And that was one of the tips when I was rewatching some of your programs here. One of the tips that you gave is a tip that Brad Rux gave me quite a few years ago. I saw you putting in your food plots like first week of August. Now, to let everybody know, you're in northern Indiana.
Yes, sir.
Upper Midwest, it's kind of like us. If you're in Ohio or Indiana or Illinois or Wisconsin or, you just go across the top of the country. One thing you see a lot that's either written or, on social media, everybody's running out there planting their food plots, end of May and into June, and it's like they get these lush food plots. I'm like, yeah, good luck when September gets here because you're not going to have anything left. And that's a pretty good tip that I think that you gave is that you got that pretty honed down, especially on these working guys who might only have one day that they can do this.
Absolutely. And food plots are only going to be as productive as what you're providing an animal. And I've always said fall food plots, the worst thing you can do is plant them too early. You put in some kind of cereal crop or rye or oat or even brassicas. The cereal rye and stuff, if you plant too early, by the time deer season opens, it's 3 foot tall and it's so tough an animal doesn't want to eat it. So I stress that to guys all the time. Guys get antsy. I do too. Everybody wants to get out and start. I call it deer stuff. They want to start doing deer stuff, but timing is everything. And you got to give them something that they want to eat when they want to eat it. And in my opinion, fall food plots, if you're planting any sooner than August, you're jumping the gun. And it's tough the later you wait because you may get into a dry spell. But that's just part of it. But I think reining yourself in and trying to hold yourself off and putting that seed in the ground at the right time is 80% of the battle.
That's the risk. Like you said, the risk is something you have to weigh. Also, the other thing I picked up on is you're really big about variety. Talk about that a little bit as far as what you plant.
Well, I mean, whitetails are creatures that don't just survive off of a one food source. And I personally believe that if I want to hunt whitetails, which we do, we'll start hunting whitetails in October. Last year was a year that was exceptional in that anybody that could have spent a lot of time in the woods in October probably had a really good opportunity at killing a good buck. For whatever reason, last year, it seemed like big whitetails were on their feet sooner. But that's no guarantee either. We may still be hunting in January. So when I put food plots in, I put them in mind that I want something there from the 1st of October when season starts, clean into January when season ends. I want whitetails on those plots. So a one seed plot is not going to get it for us. I want plots that have multiple seeds in it that provide multiple types of browse from October to January. And I like the layer plots. When you look at one of my plots, you're not going to see one plot with one thing. It may be layered. It may have corn. It may have standing beans. It may have a mixture of brassicas and cereal rye and winter wheat, and Austrian peas. I call it a smorgasbord. I want something there every single day that a whitetail wants. And I don't, after 30 years of doing this, I've just found that it works for us.
Have you found have there been any things that you avoided or problems that you've run across outside of, like you said, outside of not getting the rain when you need it?
Yeah. I think the biggest problem that I took me a long time to learn was that it doesn't matter what I plant. If my soil isn't right, if I haven't taken care of business prior to planting it, I'm not going to get out of it what I'm putting into it. I early on, I started experimenting. I mean, 30 years ago, there wasn't even food plot seed. You just, I was going down and buying winter wheat and winter oats and experimenting. And the biggest thing I learned was if my plot isn't right when I put the seed in the ground, the deer are going to taste the difference. And I finally made myself believe this when I limed half a plot and fertilized it properly and done the soil analysis and purposely made half of a plot poor and the other half right. And I would watch deer walk through the poor portion of the plot. And you couldn't see it by looking at what was there. It grew. It looked good. But to the deer, it didn't taste good. They could taste the difference between what was right and what was wrong. And that season, watching those deer miss half that plot and go to the side that I had done right, finally turned that light bulb on that I have to spend the extra money and I have to put the extra time in to make that food plot right before I plant that seed. Otherwise, you're just spending a lot of time and money on something that deer really don't want to eat.
It's a fascinating analogy. One that I can't remember who told it to me. It might have been Steve Bartella, but this was quite a few years ago. Kind of a similar analogy to what you have is like you can have a tomato that you buy at the grocery store, and then you have a tomato that you grow. That tomato is only good as what it's a vector of what that soil was. So it's like you can't just say that, oh, a tomato has X amount of, these levels of vitamins and minerals, because if the soil's not right, it's not going to uptake. It's not going to be the same. Like you said, you might be looking at two tomatoes. They might look similar, but the one that's healthiest for you, well, what was the soil that it was grown in? So I thought that was a pretty good analogy, which kind of relates to what you're talking about right there.
Well, sure, you can plant corn in premium soil that's been taken care of, and it'll yield 200 bushels. You could plant the same corn in that same field 3 years later that's not been taken care of, and it'll struggle to produce 90. Well, I believe that deer can taste the difference. I know they can. I've
Yeah.
watched it. I've fertilized drip lines on white oak groves and watched deer walk underneath white oaks that are raining acorns to get to the ones that I fertilized. They can taste the difference.
They can taste the difference. Wow, that's the thing that struck me is you said 200 bushels an acre. I remember we didn't grow up on a farm, but my dad is one generation removed from being on a farm. He said back in the day, if they could get 80 bushels an acre, that you were doing pretty good. And now it's twice that. Now it's twice.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's crazy. More than twice that.
You can see 80 bushel beans now.
Dang.
I mean, that's the insanity of how far agriculture has come in just even the last 15 years.
That's insane.
I mean, here in Indiana, Angie's family, my wife's family, they've been here for 7 generations farming. If they're not averaging 190 bushel corn, they're disappointed.
Man. Wow, that's impressive.
And, so to me, that there's no secret too. You see the reflection in the quality of the whitetails we kill. I believe it's a direct reflection. I mean, when you put whitetails in an environment where there's 200 bushel corn and 70 bushel beans and, 60, 70 bushel winter wheat, that animal is in a premium growing environment. Every single thing they need to get big is there. The only thing you have to add to that equation is longevity. Can you let that animal live long enough to get where he needs to be?
How are you guys doing on that regard as far as just your region? I know that QDM took off in many parts of the country. Indiana is known for producing big deer. Is there any problems there? Or is it pretty steadily increasing in the number of good bucks that are being produced?
Well, our deer herd really suffered for a long time. Indiana was in this reduction mode for a while, the thinking downstate, and they were allowing guys to kill 6, 7, 8 does. And they had shot the herd down. It was bad. I mean, things got really tough here. But they finally backed that off. They changed that mindset. And it's amazing how fast deer are resilient, how quickly that herd rebounded. And so numbers are stable again, and we're no different than anywhere else in the Midwest. You're always going to have, even when you're managing, we manage intensively here, but there's no guarantee. When a buck starts rutting, he can roll off this property, and a 3-year-old that we let walk, if he gets downstream 2 miles on a river, he may not make it back. But one thing I have seen here, if we can get bucks even to 4 years old in this area, you've got the potential to have a buck already in the 170s. It doesn't take long here. And if he makes it to 5, well, then you got a man on your hands.
Wow.
And that's what we like to do. We like to get these bucks to 5 years old, but there's just no guarantee. And number 2, when you have a 4-year-old that's in the 170s, maybe there's people out there that can say, yeah, I'm gonna give that deer another year. But I can just about promise you with us, if I've got a 4-year-old and he's in the 170s and he's underneath me and I've got a bow in my hand, he's probably not going to make it to 5 years old.
Then we're alike, because that deer would be dead if he was walking past me.
I just think you have to be realistic. And number 2, I'm always cognizant of this fact. What we're doing is in front of a camera, being streamed to millions of people. And there are guys, literally, probably 80% of the people that watch outdoor television that will never kill a Boone and Crockett whitetail. We live in a glass house and we understand that. So what message are we sending when we've got a mid-70s buck that's 4 years old and you just let him walk past you? You're kicking a lot of guys right in the mouth. So, we try to walk that fine line between management and insanity.
Yeah, and reality too. Man. Okay, we're going to take a quick break to thank one of our sponsors. Today's episode of Deer Talk Now podcast is brought to you by Muddy Outdoors and the new Merge cellular trail camera. Featuring simple, easy-to-use cellular activation with quick scan QR setup, the Merge Cell Cam features 26 megapixels, updated ultra-fast trigger speeds, 4 image resolutions, 80-foot detection and IR range, burst mode, and an SD card slot that takes up to 32 gigabyte cards. It operates on 8 AA batteries and has an external power jack for solar battery pack that's sold separately. Check them out at your local sporting goods retailer or visit gomuddy.com. One other thing I want to talk to you about food plots. I notice you're a big proponent on putting mock scrapes out there with mock licking branches. One thing I noticed, which I guess I should have picked up on before, but I never did, was you're a big fan of using cedar branches, aren't you?
I am.
Why is that?
Not just the branches. I'll use an entire cedar tree. Well, I think, once again, I think it's a regional thing. We don't have naturally here cedar. You don't just go to every block of timber and find cedar. The only place you're going to find cedar is where it's planted as windbreak.
Okay.
And so cedar being a soft wood, and I believe also something that's not there naturally, when you introduce it, it's almost like putting a candy bar in a kindergarten classroom. Once they find it, they love to rub and lick. They will absolutely just shred those cedar posts when we plant them. If we use a cedar licking branch, I don't know, I really don't know what it is about it that they love. But I'm smart enough to know that when I use it, they absolutely will detour out of their way to go to it. And so what we've done now, we've learned that I can take an 8 or a 9 foot cedar post. I'll just cut them right out of my windbreak right down here at the end of my driveway. I have to concrete it in the ground. If you don't concrete it in, it will last 2 days.
Wow.
They are going to push it right over. A 200-pound 4-year-old buck's just going to decimate it. And then leave licking branches off of it. Establish a mock scrape on the ground underneath the licking branch. Go to the opposite side and just rough the bark up. And I promise you, when they find it, literally every food plot that I have in front of a redneck blind, I will have a cedar licking branch and / rub post. And I can take every deer in that area and place them in that food plot in front of that blind.
Wow. So you do, what I was going to say here was, when you do it the way you said, like you cement them into the ground and all that stuff, yep. How long will one last typically?
Well, if you leave them there long enough, they'll rub them in two. But what I have figured out is that the fresher they are, the better they like them. So it's a lot more work for me, but I go in every year in early September. I take every old cedar post out and replace it with a brand new green, fresh cut one. And for whatever reason, they respond to the fresh ones better than they do the old ones. They'll still work the old posts, but not nearly like they do if you replace them every year.
So are you doing this during hunting season then?
Usually right around the 1st of September is when I like them started.
Right before archery season?
Yep, and then they're in about a month before archery season opens. But I don't think it matters. I think you could go in the 15th of October and plant one, and they're going to be on it 2 or 3 days. And then, deer are creatures of habit. I think a lot of it's social too. Once they find it, once one buck takes it over, every buck in the area eventually is going to be on it. It'll just become a community spot. I've seen scrapes underneath them as big as truck hoods, and they'll literally rub every ounce of bark off of it that they can. And, once again, it was trial and error. I started doing this years ago. Don't even know why, other than maybe I was out west and I seen, in Dakotas, I seen how they like rubbing cedar. So I thought, all right, well, let's find some cedar and let's try it in Indiana. And it's a staple now. It's one of
It's
my
worked.
go-to. Yes.
It's worked. I know that just from a behavior standpoint, deer bucks do like that aromatic qualities from
Yeah.
cedar. Here we have, like you said, regionally it's different. I mean, you could have white pine, red pine,
Sure.
sumac, tamarack. There's all sorts of those conifers that they like. But that interesting note that you said, the fresher the better. That's something I never really thought about, and I think
Yeah, I
that's
don't know
something worth
why.
trying.
I don't know why. And number two, I don't really know would the success I have with it here in Indiana, where cedar isn't a naturally growing conifer, would it work in Wisconsin or Kansas where there's lots of cedar? I don't know.
Hmm.
And I think that's one of the reasons it does work here so well is because you're introducing something to them that they can't find anywhere else. So if I plant two cedar posts in a 50-acre block of timber, which is a national forest here where I'm from, and they find it, well, there's two destinations in that woods that they can't find it anywhere else.
Makes
And
total
it just,
sense.
yeah.
Makes total
So,
sense. And like you said, the other thing about it was it's almost like we can't use minerals here, but it's almost like when we could, if you put out a mineral block, once one finds it, boom, they're all there. It's kind of the
sure.
same thing with. I mean, now that's a little bit different because they're consuming it, but with a visual signpost like a rubbing tree or a licking branch, set up like you have there, it makes total sense from a deer's
Well,
behavior.
I remember growing up, my granddad was an old hillbilly from southeastern Kentucky, fed 13 kids with a fishing pole and a gun and trapped. And I would sit with him and watch him observe things. And I would ask him, we'd watch something, and I'd say, Papa, why do they do that? And he'd say, well, son, I don't know why they do that. All I know is that they do that. I watched one time, he told me it rained really hard that night. He says, you better be on the soybeans in the morning because he said the deer are going to be in the soybeans. And I said, well, why? He said, well, I don't always know why they do what they do. I only know after watching them that after it rains, deer will be in soybeans. And he said, that's all you need to understand with animals in general, son, is watch what they do and understand when something happens, they react in a certain way. That's all you need to understand about it. Well, years later, I finally figured out the reason that they go to the soybeans after a big rain is because it softens them up. And for about 2 days, you have a window that those beans will be really soft, then they'll feed on them. Once they get hard again, then they'll roll off those and go a different direction. So that advice that old man taught me was some of that was the best advice that was ever given is you don't always have to understand why animals do something. Just know that they do things for a reason, and it doesn't matter whether you understand it, but they're going to do that. And so through observation over these years, I've learned a lot just from that little bit of advice. Just pay attention and understand that they're going to do something at a certain time.
Yeah, you don't always have to question it. You just got to know that if it's
Yeah,
happening,
you don't have
there's a
to be a
reason.
PhD on it. You're not going to write a thesis about it. Just understand that animals do what animals do.
That's right. Let's talk about. There's a major thing I want to get to as far as your hunting strategies, but another smaller thing that I noticed. You're also big on these new remote cameras, cell cameras. We use the Cuddy Links here. We love them. But I know that you've had a lot of success with those remote cameras and, again, a regional thing. Well, maybe not regional. A statewide thing for you. You have a lot of flat country, a lot of open country. You can't always get in there and scout the way other people do because you're blowing deer out of there all the time. Tell me about your system of using cameras and how they've helped you hunt and be more successful.
Well, anybody that knows me knows that what I would tell people first and foremost when you're hunting an upper age class of whitetails, 4 and 5 year old whitetails, is that they're homebodies, and the thing that they value more than anything else is their security and being left alone. And they're not going to tolerate being bumped and pushed. So if you're hunting those kind of whitetails, especially here in my area, your best opportunity to kill those deer generally is the first 2 or 3 times you hunt them, because they're going to figure it out. It's not going to take them long. When you start rolling into their bedroom or even the outskirts of their bedroom, they're going to cut your track after you leave that night. I don't care how clean you think you are, you're never going to fool a 5-year-old's nose. And number two, the best opportunity to kill that deer is when he first starts daylighting. You've got that window. So we absolutely are huge proponents of not even going near our properties until it's time. And by time, I mean when those cell cameras start sending me pictures of those 4 and 5-year-old bucks moving into daylight. And not just once, usually the second or third time. And when I see that buck daylight about the second or third time, the next day, if the wind is right, I'm on him, because that's my window. And if you can get that deer killed that first 2 or 3 times you hunt him, you're probably in good shape. And if you haven't got him killed by the 7th, 8th, 9th of November, well, then it's going to turn into what I call the grind, because once he starts locking down and breeding, sometimes I think you're better off just to go home and rest up for 2 weeks and wait till about Thanksgiving until the rut's over and they start post-rut chasing again, and then you're back in the game. But those cameras, I would say, have probably been first and foremost the reason that we've killed all of the upper end deer that we've killed in the last 4 or 5 years, because we know when it's time, we know when to move in on them, and we don't go near any of those places until I see that information. Once it's in front of me, I know it's time to move. Last year, I worked 44 straight days of 7/12s, did not hunt a single day until the 7th of November.
Wow.
I had pictures that morning of one of our upper end bucks as he was coming into the timber. I knew he was in there. I knew he was chasing. We went in and set up at 1:30, and I had him killed by 4:30.
Wow. So you had that thing, you were honed in.
Sure. And I mean,
deer.
you can do that with these cameras. And I hesitate sometimes to put this too much out there, because my worry is that the knee-jerk reaction from some of the wildlife agencies is going to be, that's an unfair advantage, we need to take that away from you.
Right.
Well, if that's an unfair advantage, then there's just going to be something else that's an unfair advantage. But I think they're the greatest tool that we have in allowing us to do what we do, which is try to hunt big, mature whitetails.
It is, and that's all it is a tool. I mean, there's
lots of tools.
It's giving you some great intel. But at the end of the day, like you said, if you're dealing with a 4 or 5-year-old, you're doing a lot more than slapping a camera on a tree.
Sure. And the problem with regular cameras is every time you walk in to check a card and walk out, you're leaving your calling card that you're there. They understand the rhythms of hunting season. They've been through that 4, 5, 6 years. They understand that when guys start invading their domain, August and September and October, start walking in and walking out, they know what that means. And most guys think that big deer disappear on them, leave their core area when they start educating them. And I don't believe that at all. I think a big whitetail's core area never exceeds more than about 500 acres. And when you start stepping on his toes, I don't think he leaves. He just crawls in his hole on that 500 acres, and he doesn't move in the daylight anymore. They simply go nocturnal. They don't have to move, especially here in this open country. A big deer can set back 400 yards deep in a small patch of timber and watch young bucks push does out in an open field and simply wait till dark and then slide out and go out and take a doe away from it and breed it. They don't have to move in the daylight if they don't want to. So if you don't give them a reason to do that, they will daylight. But as soon as they know you're in the area, they know they're being hunted, that's when it gets tough.
Amen to that. The point you just brought up there, which is one I wanted you to really expand on, is open country. And when I talk about that, a lot of people are going to be able to relate to this, because I'm just assuming I know you live in Indiana. I don't know where, but I know my general idea is a lot of croplands, a lot of flat croplands, very few woodlots, and the woodlots are probably small. So tell me if that's accurate. And then what are some of the things you do to combat that? Because I know it's got to be difficult to try to hunt deer in that type of environment.
Extremely accurate. A giant block of timber, a national forest is 50 acres.
Wow.
Seriously. And then those blocks of timbers are going to vary between 20 to 40 acres. And you're going to usually have 2-mile gaps between those blocks of timber. And everything else is just going to be wide open, flat farm country, maybe a brushy fence row here and there, a woody ditch bank. The hardest thing about hunting deer here in our part of the world is entrance and exit. That's it. If you can't get in and you can't get out, then you're already treading water. I mean, and with us, that's everything. Every place that I put a blind, every place I set a food plot, the very first thing I'm thinking about is how am I going to get to it and how am I going to get away from it? If I can do those two things, I'm always in the game. But if I'm bumping deer walking in, as I'm coming in on a 30-acre patch of timber, if I'm coming across a mile of open field, before I get within, a quarter mile of the timber, they're all going out the other side. So if you can't get to your stand, you're obviously not going to kill a deer. So we put a lot of work and effort into vision screens around our plots, around our patches of timber, to deny them the ability to lay there 40 yards inside the block of timber with their back to the wind, looking out the downwind side, waiting for you to come in. If they can't see you coming, it makes it a little tougher on them. That's what actually I've done the last couple of days. I was planting vision screens, trying to get that stuff all in the ground and ready to go. Since we started doing that, you can just look back the last 5 or 6 years at the caliber of bucks we've been killing. And not just that, but the fact that we're killing them early because we're able to get to the timber and we're able to get away from it. And if we're in a blind and we're trapped and a food plot's full of deer, I have no qualms with calling somebody and having them bump that food plot, drive in on a tractor. Deer don't care. They see tractors here in Indiana every single day. They see farm implements. Bump them and wait till they're gone and slide out. Take that extra effort to get out without educating deer. The extra effort to get in without educating deer. If you don't educate them, then a food plot can be successful every single time you hunt it. And I think it's the mistake guys make. They'll put all this work into a food plot. They'll have it just the way they need it. And the first 2 or 3 times they hunt it, they're crawling out of their blinds and they're blowing deer off that food plot as they're getting out at dark. And then all of a sudden you'll hear them. They'll say, well, man, I don't know where my deer went. They're not using my plot anymore. Yeah, they're using it. They're just using it in the dark. Yep. Because it doesn't take them long to figure it out. So to us, I think it's the single most important thing we do here is figuring out how I'm going to access a blind and get away from it. Because as long as I do that right, I'm always in the game.
Yeah, that's a tactic that I've used. I did a seminar once at one of the Deer and Turkey Expos. The guy tried to take me to task on it. And he said, well, what's the difference? You're blowing those deer off. I'd say, like you said, have somebody come pick you up in a truck or blow the deer off. And I always said that will, the deer, it is pressure. But worse pressure is me crawling out of that tree stand and the deer seeing exactly where I was.
Exactly.
Way worse.
They know the game stuff. Way worse. And I tell you what, we do a lot as well. We'll have people do it, what we call a rolling drive-by. We'll be sitting on the tailgate of a UTV or sitting on the steps of a tractor and drive us right to the timber. And as the tractor goes by a blind, we just roll off and we have the tractor intentionally keep going another 100 yards. And as that tractor's rolling down that timber line and he can watch whitetails heading back into the cover of the timber, we're easing up into the blind. And he'll do a U-turn and drive away. And before we're even set up, you can see whitetails coming back out of the heavy cover into the edge of the timber, watching that tractor drive away. And 5 minutes later, they'll bed back down.
That's a great tip. Rolling drive-by, that's a great tip.
Yeah, because that's all they're going to do when it comes to a tractor or anything that's tractor-like. Them tractors never chase them. They never shoot at them. They never hurt them. They see them every day. So they're just going to flex back in and watch. And when he leaves, they're going to come right back. And so we have done that several times and ended up killing upper end bucks within 2 hours of the drop off. And so, because you're not going to walk a mile across that open field and make it to that blind.
No way.
But you can drive there with a tractor or a UTV and do a rolling drive-by and get by with it.
Yeah, law of diminishing returns on that, walking across a field. We did that in Illinois. You know, like you said, you better get it done that first day, and we'd always go in way early. The other thing that I noticed, I saw in one of your videos, you're a big proponent on foregoing those morning hunts for that reason, right?
Yes. Yep.
And going in at midday?
To each their own. Yeah, we like to just get up, have breakfast, pack a lunch. About 9 o'clock, once I know all the deer are off the fields and they're all back in the bedding area, we slide in and we'll cab up and set from 9:30 the rest of the day. And I would say right now 70% of the whitetails we're killing between 11 and 1:30.
Wow.
Right in the middle of the day.
Wow.
So, two things is that, once again, you've heard me talk about access and exit, and my big pet peeve is I don't like educating deer. Or when you're walking across a 400-acre open field for 3/4 of a mile or a half mile to get to a stand in the dark, I don't care who you are educating whitetails. That is when they are on their feet. That last hour before daylight, that's their peak feeding period before they go to bed. And you are educating deer. I know, and this idea that, well, they can't see or they can't smell you. Yes, they know what you are. They see you. Humans don't walk across fields every day. So you're doing more damage. You are inflicting more damage if you're hunting upper end whitetails by walking in the dark, unless you're hunting somewhere where you know that you can get in without educating whitetails. I'm a firm believer sometimes you're better off just to wait until 9 o'clock and go set the rest of the day.
Wow. Those are some awesome tips there, Tony. I some of the things that I do, but some of the ways that you look at it just gives me a different wrinkle. And I'm sure for a lot of the listeners, it gives you a different wrinkle on how you can apply that to where you're hunting.
Well, there's places that we hunt in the morning, but they're designed for morning hunts. I can drop down in a agricultural drainage ditch at a gravel road, and I can walk 3/4 of a mile in that ditch, 8 foot below field level, and access the blind. I'm comfortable doing that in the morning. Number one, I'm in the water. I'm not leaving a scent trail. And number two, they simply can't see me. But the idea of walking across an open field in the dark, I abandoned that practice several years ago.
Yeah, for good reason. And I can see the proof is on the wall behind you.
We do all right.
You do all right. Well, Tony, thank you very much. For the listeners and viewers who want to know more, learn more about the American Way, where can they find you?
Well, you can find us on social media, the American Way TV. You can find us on Pursuit Channel. We air 52 weeks now, 3 days a week, prime times on Monday night and Sunday mornings. Obviously, you can find us on YouTube. So we're not real hard to find.
Just like everybody else. So YouTube, Facebook, and obviously Pursuit Channel. I didn't know you guys were on 52 weeks a year. I know that's a lot of work there too. So on top of everything else, all the your regular jobs. I know your wife has a regular job. You guys are cranking out TV shows as well.
Yeah. Well, we're kind of used to it now. We've been doing it for a while, so.
Yeah. Well, God bless you, Tony. Thank you for joining us. And Good luck this year. You got me wanting to go out there and plant right now, but I can't because it is stifling outside here right now.
Yeah, well, we're looking at 101 here today too for actually the next 3 days.
Wow.
So
It's hitting
I got a
all
lot
of
of
us.
inside projects. Got the AC running. I think it's
Yes.
a good 3-day stretch for inside work.
That's a perfect time to do it. Thanks again, Tony. Thank you for joining us on Deer Talk Now.
Thanks so much, man. I appreciate it. Always eager to talk deer.
All right. For Tony Walker and the American Way, check them out. Again, their Facebook page, pretty impressive. You can see some of the videos there, photos, and also their YouTube channel. And Pursuit, they actually have a new app that's called Pursuit Up. You can watch all their shows archived there. So for Tony Walker, I am Dan Schmidt. We're going to catch you next time on Deer Talk Now. And again, if you're listening to this on a podcast platform, just make sure you subscribe to that link for Deer Talk Now, or you can watch all the programs, the podcasts, and the video versions on our YouTube page, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, blah, 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 all the social media platforms. We will catch you next week for another podcast of Deer Talk Now. The Deer Talk Now podcast is brought to you by CuddyLink cell cameras. Up to 24 cameras, one cell plan, and as low as $10 per month. 10-point crossbows, the fastest crossbows in the world. Wildlife Research Center's Scent Killer Gold. Apply it, dry it, and go hunt. Full range hanging systems, the best way to display your shoulder mount trophies. Hunt Stand, the #1 hunting and land management app. And Traditions Firearms. Feel the difference.